Well, hello and glorious day, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. So today, um, I have the immense pleasure of having this webinar with a good friend of mine, a brilliant, illustrious, and innovative doctor himself, Dr. Gary Grun from Third Rock Essentials. And we're going to be talking about skin cancer awareness and prevention today, and of a very excellent product, if I say so myself, that he has created that we're going to be talking about. Actually, a couple products, but one in particular is their sunblock. But diving into skin cancer and the prevalence of it. What is it? What are the different types and different aspects of some anecdotal stories that he actually has that I think would be very informative to a lot of you. And I do ask that if you could please take a moment and fill out the poll. We would like to get to know what it is that you know about skin cancer, about how often you use sunblock. Try to get a feel for your information, for your knowledge, and your interest in this topic. So, my name is Dr. Laura Varden. I'm an in-house clinician for the DNA company. I'm also Dean of the DNA University. And my wonderful guest today, Dr. Gary Grun. Hello, and thank you for coming. And for those audience members out there who may not know you, would you please give us a little bit of your background and introduce yourself?
It's good to be seen and not have to be overseen. So I'm like happy and very thankful to be with you today. Thanks, Dr. Laura. Um, so I think we've done one of these earlier this year. It's quite a few months now passed by. So I guess reintroducing my background. I'm a PhD chemical engineer. Um, I also have a registered patent. I'm a registered patent agent, U.S. patent agent. So I do patent work, protecting products that we develop as well as products other people developed and other inventions. And I also am an adjunct professor at Duke University in the Pratt School of Engineering, and teach both intellectual asset management, valuing IP, as well as sustainability. We teach the Masters of Engineering Management program students that sustainability is really hard to achieve without profitability. So that's another area of expertise that I've been involved with, including clean energy transitions. So that can mean pretty much any energy that people don't consider to be fossil fuels, although fossil fuels can actually be clean too. It just depends. So another field of interest and I guess expertise over the years. But of course, we're here to talk about skin cancer prevention, skin cancer overall, and also talk about how all this came about, that I got involved in this at all, because it certainly wasn't something I really set my career path on to get involved in. But over time, I've learned a lot about prevention and skin cancer in general, and actually have some personal anecdotes as well. So
Well, we really appreciate you being here and all your brilliance. And I will say that for our audience, if you have any burning questions, uh, if you want to know the ins and outs of what's going on, or you happen to have skin cancer yourself or a family member who does, this is a great time to pop in questions in the Q&A, to raise your hand. We would love to have you ask your questions live a little bit later in this webinar. We love having that, real time, real life interaction. So definitely get your questions together as we're, discussing things. If there's something that pops up, please get it in the Q&A or write it down so that way you can ask your question live.
sounds
So,
good.
getting into talking about skin cancer, I think that it's really important. Let's say, what are the types of skin cancer? So, of the three most common types, we've got basal cell carcinoma, we have squamous cell carcinoma, and melanoma. Do you want to unpack those a little bit?
To the best of my ability, uh, because because that's not my field of expertise, is understanding the differences between the skin cancer types. But I will say that I've personally been involved recently with basal cell, and basal cell cancer used to be pre-cancer. So in my understanding of basal cells is maybe 20 years ago, basal cells were considered to be precancerous cells, um, at least somewhat benign, very, very small chance, like maybe less than 10% chance that they would metastasize. And basal cells, usually you'll find those in the dermis and the epidermis. So the dermis layer and then the epidermis layer, which is usually the layer below it. Or maybe it's the other way around. I'm sorry. Let me see. Epidermis and then dermis layer. And so what happens is the basal cells usually will stay on the top layer of the skin, and the chance for them to get deeper and deeper down into your skin, and at least the second layer of your skin, and then metastasize is quite low. But in my personal experience, very recently, I did have basal cell issues and just a spot on my shoulder, and found out that they're basal cell nodules as well as just quote unquote surface basal cells, which would be on the epidermis and then the dermis layer. And the nodules seem to penetrate this, at least from the epidermis down to the dermis layer. So there's a higher probability that those basal cells will get into the bloodstream and possibly metastasize. And if they metastasize, they can metastasize into squamous cells. They can even metastasize into melanoma. So there certainly is a risk associated with that.
Yeah. Well, actually, what I'll do is I'll jump in and
Okay, good.
do a brief description of each, and then you can tell people what happened to you.
Sure, sure.
Okay, so for the audience, when we're talking about basal cell carcinoma, as we had mentioned, this is the most common, the least aggressive form of skin cancer. It usually arises from basal cells. And like Dr. Grun had said, excuse me, these are found in the lowest layer of the epidermis, which is the outer part of the layer of skin. The dermis is a bit deeper. So really, when you see these basal cell carcinoma cells, these often appear as like a pearly or waxy bump. It's generally flat, slightly flesh colored or brown, like brownish colored, and it could bleed or scab, as it heals and then returns. And so as far as like risk factors for basal cell carcinoma, primarily it is caused by long-term exposure to UV radiation from the sun or tanning beds. And a lot of times, because, as he was mentioning, that it rarely does spread, which is called metastasizing to other parts of the body. But it can cause significant local damage, especially if it's not treated. And treatments for that typically involve some sort of surgical removal called Mohs, M-O-H-S, where they just remove, layers of the skin to get the cancerous or precancerous cells, but trying to leave the rest of the normal cells of the skin there. And it's obviously caused more local significant damage. But, you can also use topical medications, which actually one of his products does very well. So that's the basal cell. excuse me, getting into squamous cell carcinoma. This is the second most common type of skin cancer, and it really originates in the squamous cells. These are a bit flatter when you actually look at histology. And these are found in the upper layers of the epidermis. Now, this often will appear red, scaly patch, open sores, maybe like a wart-like growth, crusty area that may bleed or crust over. And when for these types of cells, this really is caused by that cumulative sun exposure. Again, we're talking that long-term exposure to these, to chemicals, radiation, UV damage. And these types of cells, the squamous cell carcinoma, can metastasize, spreading into other cells and tissues, especially if it's left untreated. So although that is, less common, but it can happen. And again, typical treatments, surgical removal, radiation therapy, topical treatments, especially if it's caught early, it's a very good prognosis. Now, moving into melanoma. This really is the most dangerous type of skin cancer, and it originates in the melanocytes. These are, the types of cells responsible for producing melanin. This is the pigment that gives skin its color, and it's actually produced as a protective measure. That's why we get suntans, but we have to be careful, getting sunburns, and we can talk a little bit more about that after. So for melanoma, how can you recognize it? Well, it often resembles a mole or can appear as a new dark spot on the skin. And really what you want to do is identify it by the ABCDE rule. A for asymmetry, meaning it's not symmetrical in size. B for border irregularity. C for color variation. D for diameter larger than 6 millimeters, and E for evolving in shape, size, or color. So that's something that you want to keep track of. And as far as, again, it's the same type of risk factor because these are more consecutive things of that long-term exposure. And really, when you start getting into treatments and prognoses for melanoma, obviously that can spread. It metastasizes quickly to other parts of the body, and obviously making early detection is very crucial. Treatment options are typically, again, surgical removal. You could even do immunotherapy, targeted therapies, chemotherapies, radiation therapy. And honestly, the prognosis really depends on the stage at diagnoses. So obviously, early stage melanomas have a much higher survival rate. So really that encompasses, the situation. So being aware is very important. And I would like Dr. Gary to tell us about his recent incident of it. And then I want to get to the poll.
Yeah, no, thank you that was terrific, and it was very concise and precise. And I certainly don't have the wherewithal, nor did I do enough homework before this podcast or webinar to provide that conclusive 3 types of skin cancer. And it turns out that, this whole thing started because I had 2 guys that I surfed with that were in their young 20s, and both got diagnosed with melanoma. And their doctors told them, different doctors, different times, told them the same thing. They said, if you continue to surf, you'll get melanoma again, which was probably not the wisest thing to say to a 20-year-old kid because they stop surfing. In my case, I've been surfing for 40 years now, and so being exposed to the sun is not, there's no way to avoid it. And of course, I like to do other things outside too, tennis, running, all that stuff. So for me, just, if you turn 65 in this country, there's a 50% chance or more that you'll get some form of skin cancer. And that's a scary thing. And of course, the question is, well, why is that? Maybe the sunscreens don't work too well, and we'll talk about that. But for me personally, I had a growth on my left shoulder early this year, and I live in the Virginia Beach area. Trying to get a dermatologist to see me was almost impossible. I finally wound up getting one near Duke, but she looked at it and did a biopsy, and I got it, and it was basal cell carcinoma, and it wasn't any kind of big deal. The reason I went is it started to bleed, and it started to bleed, and it scabbed a little bit, but bled pretty much spontaneously. And so I said, well, maybe I need to get this thing looked at. And it turned out the biopsy showed that it was basal cell carcinoma, and then I was supposed to come back to have it removed. I think the schedule was like 5 weeks later. And so I started using itch block, which we can talk about later. I started using a product that I make, which is chelated zinc oxide with L-arginine, and that product I just continue to put that on in the morning and the evening, and just make sure that it stayed on there. And essentially, what happened was the scab that was created, both by the biopsy and by the actual basal cell carcinoma, that scab just pretty much disappeared. It actually fell off after like 2 or 3 days of usage. And then there was hardly anything left to see. But of course, I went back 5 weeks later, and the dermatologist said, well, it looks a lot better. She had to admit that. And she said, well, but I think we still should remove it, still remove what's there. And of course, they get paid by scheduling the procedure and then removing it. And of course, I said, well, I think it's pretty much gone. But she said, well, okay, well, why don't we compromise? I'll do another biopsy. And I said, that's great. Let's do it. And they did. And then instead of waiting 2 or 3 weeks to find out that it was basal cell carcinoma, she called me herself like 3 or 4 days later after they sent it out to the lab and said, well, there's still some basal cells there, but it sounds like you really don't want to get, the full treatment. Maybe, as you mentioned, Dr. Lara, that you might be eligible for MOHS treatment, MOHS treatment. So for people who don't understand what that is or know about it, you can find a lot about all this stuff online now, but it's basically removing a few layers of the skin at a time, as much as you can do that. There's some laser ablation treatments that you can do. Those are a little bit more lengthy and costly usually. So I went and saw the Mohs treatment facility doctor, and he looked at it, and then that was about 3 or 4 weeks. So now we're about 8 to 9, 10 weeks into this thing, from March until now, probably end of May. And he looked at it and he said, well, it looks pretty good, but I can do the biopsy right here. I'm an oncologist as well. So he took a small sample, went into the lab, came back, and they did a small slice. And he said, well, I think we should do like one more small slice because I still see a few basal cells. And so I left the office there with a little bit of a crater in my shoulder, but I guess a peace of mind that he had gotten essentially all the basal cells that existed, including some nodules that he thought he saw. The nodules, for people who wouldn't understand necessarily what that means, if you look, you can see some photos of them. They're a little bit more like sort of like a jellyfish type looking squiggly thing that you can see that the cell sort of tries to dig deeper into the skin. And the nodules are a little bit more concerning because, again, you don't really want the basal cell to get too much into the bloodstream. And of course, based on how your immune system is functioning, that could lead to, let's just say, a more serious condition. So in my case, I think I was very fortunate. A lot of the two doctors I had were very cautious. They wanted to make sure that, it didn't get worse and that I was completely, quote unquote, skin cancer free. But, in my view, and again, I think, always err on the side of caution, especially when it comes to skin cancer, because it can be lethal. And in my case, especially, because I am outdoors so much and I am exposed so much, you don't want to mess around. So that's my little anecdotal story from this year. It all happened very quickly, and I feel very gracious. I feel very a sense of gratitude to the doctors that they probably did the right thing. And interestingly enough, then I have products that actually healed that little crater, so you probably can't really even see it anymore on my shoulder. But anyway, so that's my little anecdotal story for the folks that are listening to this.
Yeah, and I mean, again, it is because in your case, long-term exposure in the sun
Sure.
because you surf.
Yeah,
And
that'll do it.
that's a lot of exposure and, going out. But, uh, you know, in doing the things to protect your skin, I mean, it's not perfect, nothing is truly perfect, but, you know, thinking that it could have been worse. But before we dive into, some of ways that genetics plays a part in skin cancer, I'd like to bring up the poll questions. So
Okay.
beautiful. So from the questions that we had, our first question was, how do you currently utilize sunscreen? And we have actually quite an even split between often, occasional, and never. We only have about, just under 15% that said always. Um,
Right.
you know,
Right.
so very interesting. And it would I'd like to know if you want to pop it in the chat. For those people who said never, why not? Why
Right.
not you? Throw that in the chat and we'll take a look. Also, if you have any questions, because I am seeing questions in the chat, please put them in the Q&A. It's a little too difficult for us to, scroll through in the chat to be able to answer questions. It's much easier if you put it in the Q&A. So,
Yeah, great. We don't want to miss any.
yeah, right, exactly, because there's some great questions in there.
There are.
So the second question, do you feel like you have a good understanding of UVA and UVB light? And here we have an even split of yes and no. So that's definitely something I want to touch on. After we're done, I would love, to have you just do a very brief difference between the two.
Sure.
And then our question 3, do you know someone who has or had, or do you have a family member, a family risk factor for skin cancer? And we've got a whopping 82% that said yes,
Wow.
only 18% that said no. So
Wow.
yeah, this, for this group, this is of obviously strong interest, and we want to be able to get you some information that can help both for prevention, awareness, and also some other, little things that we can give
Touch on.
information on. Exactly. So our last question, do you have any concerns about sunscreen usage based on any of the following? And overwhelmingly is ingredients. 94% of people are interested and concerned about the ingredients. So you've come to the right place. You've come to
You
the right
have. You
person,
have.
because his ingredients are non-toxic, food grade. It really is the way to go. But we also have concerns about the environmental impact, as well as use with children and then other. So for those people who put other, please, pop in the chat. I know that there, were some, mentions about, different color skin, or if you have very olive skin tone, can you still get skin cancer? That answer is yes. You know,
Yes, definitely.
there are other, you know, concerns. So yeah, please. And thank you so much for answering that. That really gives us an idea on, your current knowledge and where your interests lie. So
Yes.
Dr. Gary, could you very briefly give some information to people about the difference between UVA and UVB?
Sure. We'll start with that. That's fast and easy. Um, and it is a little nerdy, but you have to think about light in terms of wavelength. So sunlight uh, incandescent light in your room, fluorescent lights that are in grocery stores, shopping centers, when you go into a store or something, they all emit light at a different frequency and wavelength. So that's a little bit sometimes difficult for people who are non-science oriented to understand, but think of it as frequency is the number of times in a certain period, usually 60 seconds, that a wave is being emitted. And think of a wave as just like you would an ocean wave or a sound wave. It goes, it's usually sinusoidal and cyclical. And so wavelength is a very important part of light, whether it's light that's UV, IR light, which is, these are all energy, right? So IR light, UV light, microwaves, all are energy, and they all emit the energy at a certain wavelength. So for UV light from the sun, there's UVB and UVA. And why did I say UVB first and UVA second? Because UVB is the shorter, higher energy, which means it's emitted in a higher frequency in a shorter period of time than UVA. So UVB is about 290 to about 330, 335 nanometers. Nanometers are one way to measure wavelength. So nanometers are very, very small. Your hair, a piece of hair, for example, is maybe 5 to 10 nanometers. So 290 to 330 nanometers is actually a pretty healthy wavelength, pretty healthy, I would say, definitely visible wavelength, right? And then UVA is from about 330 nanometers to about 470 or 80 nanometers. And it turns out that the UVB light is the higher energy, shorter wavelength, causing more skin discoloration, mostly sunscreen, mostly sun tans and sunburns are coming from UVB light. And your body's built that way. When you get the UVB light that causes you to start turning pink, your body's saying, I got all the vitamin D I need for the day in 20 minutes, let's say for Caucasians like you and me, Dr. Lara. For people with olive skin, it may take 30 or 40 or 50 minutes before they start to turn pink. But your body's telling you, I got all the vitamin D I need for the day. Now it's time to get out of the sun. For UVA, it's more invisible, sort of more dangerous UV light in a way, because it's a longer penetrating wavelength. The wavelength's longer, which means it'll get into more deeply into your skin, whether it be the epidermis layer, the dermis layer, or further down. It'll get further into your skin. And it's been proven that UVA causes DNA damage, much more so than UVB. I'm not going to say that UVB causes no DNA damage, because everybody's skin is different and everybody's immune system is different, and everybody's DNA is different, as you well know. So I would say to you that UVA light, which if you've ever woken up in the morning after getting a sunburn and you were sore, what you've actually feeling is that nerve cells have been damaged by UVA light, the long penetrating light, not the UVB light, but the UVA light, which may not have really contributed to your sunburn too much in terms of color, the way it looks, but definitely contributed in terms of pain. Because nerve cells, like all other cells, have a function, and nerve cells, when they are split, which UVA light will actually split nerve cells, will cause pain, right? Because nerve cells, when they get damaged, cause pain. So that's sort of the UVA distinguishing feature that sunlight provides, which in small doses is very healthy, and in large doses can actually become lethal over time. People do get sun poisoning, for example.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and honestly, when it comes to a sunburn, uh, like you had already mentioned, it can cause that DNA damage.
Mhm.
You know, because the UVA radiation directly damaging DNA in the skin cells. Actually, what he was talking about is that it can form these CPDs, they're cyclobutane pyrimidine dimers. And what ends up happening is they're abnormal bonds between adjacent DNA bases, usually thymine and cytosine. And that damage distorts the DNA structure and can interfere with replication and transcription of the cells. And oftentimes when that happens, the repair mechanisms, when they try to repair the damage, sometimes they can, but sometimes they can't. And generally, if the DNA repair mechanisms don't work, then it actually will push the cell into apoptosis, that programmed cell death, to prevent the propagation of the damaged DNA. And when we're talking about an inflammatory response, so yes, it can damage the nerve cells, the skin cells. And when you have sunburns, there is a cytokine release. Okay, so the damaged cells release this pro-inflammatory cytokines like interleukin 1, IL-1, IL-6, TNF alpha. And these actually promote that inflammation, leading to the redness, swelling, pain, and produces that immune response. So, then you also consider your immune response of cells like your neutrophils, your macrophages being brought to that site of injury that contributes to that characteristic of the redness, the heat of the sunburn. So
Yes.
when we're
Yes, and
talking
it's
about,
interesting because you brought up the dimers,
yeah,
and so it turns out, my original background, my PhD thesis, my master's thesis were on polymer science. So dimers are two mers, two parts of a molecule that come together to make a dimer, which is two mers. And what happens with UV light, at UVA especially, is it causes something called chain scission, where it literally splits that dimer into individual mers or more. It could do more damage than that, but usually there's a bond between the dimer that's fairly it's weaker, let's just say, than some of the other bonds for other molecules. And so the UVA light can definitely split those. And then you did a great job of explaining, from a biological standpoint, and DNA and microbiology standpoint, what exactly happens, internally while that's going on.
well,
And again, the
the interesting
overexposure that
thing
causes.
is, for the melanin, I had mentioned that earlier, melanin production, that's what makes you look tan. Well, it's actually
Right.
the MC1R gene that's involved in the production of melanin. And what happens is that when your skin cells are being exposed to this, and it's recognizing, oh, okay, there's some photobiomodulation going on, there's some photo damage, the damage from the sun, and we need to protect the DNA. So melanin is produced and acts like kind of like an umbrella against the rain, to cover the DNA that
Yes, absolutely. Great
nucleus.
analogy. Great
So
analogy. And, Eric Bernstein, who's a dermatologist on the East Coast, over 15 years ago had a conference. He called it a photobiology conference.
yeah.
And one of the presentations at the photobiology conference was entitled Tanning Your Hide. So, so it turns out that UV light is actually used to make leather garments. And of course, you don't want your skin turning into leather. so,
No,
so that's
I've
another
seen
way.
people who've spent way too much time in the sun and their skin does look very leather-like.
Absolutely.
But so getting back to some of the genes that are
Yes.
involved, because if people are looking at, oh, okay, well, I've got my DNA reports,
Yes.
what kinds of things can I look at? What's involved here? Well,
Right.
DNA, I'm sorry, the vitamin D synthesis, which you have already, kind of alluded to, and that we've mentioned, that UVB and vitamin D, this is one of the most beneficial aspects of sun exposure. I mean, we don't
Right.
want people to be afraid to go out in the sun. And I
Right.
noticed that, some people going, why don't you use sunscreen? I was noticing, well, I don't use sunscreen because, I want my vitamin D, you know,
Right, right.
I pay attention to how much time I'm out there, or they're allergic to some of the ingredients in that, which I want to get to after. But looking at vitamin D, yes, we want that. So one of the things that you want to look at is your vitamin D pathway in your reports. And this would be in your anti-inflammatory system of the report. So looking at your CYP2R1 gene, which is the first gene associated with the vitamin D pathway, because that is what converts vitamin 2, which we get from the sun, that gets converted into vitamin D3 in the liver, shifts over into the kidneys, gets converted to the active form, calcitriol, in the kidneys, and that's what we use. So then there is the GC gene. It's also the VDBP, vitamin D binding protein gene. And that tells how well do you transport vitamin D to the tissues and the cells. If you're not doing that so well, then, you may need to supplement, especially if you're not converting D2 to D3 very well, but still getting some sun exposure, but maybe going out at different times, breaking up your exposures or taking a vitamin D3 supplement, okay? Because we want that transport to happen to get to all of the cells. But then we also have your VDR gene. This is the vitamin D receptor gene. And depending on how well you're actually binding vitamin D, which is a hormone, by the way, and is necessary in over 10% of all of your protein coding genes. There's 22,000 protein coding genes. So you're looking at over 2,000 genes that need vitamin D for proper functioning. Well, that vitamin D has to be bound to that receptor for the cell. How well do you do that? So that vitamin D pathway is very important when it comes to sun exposure to get the benefits, but also in the process for healing, for gut, for skin, for calcium, for, so many other aspects. Like I said, over 2,000, protein coded genes needed. But other genes that are necessary, and as far as are directly responsible when it comes to sun exposure and toxins, and associated with skin cancers, that would be your SOD2, superoxide dismutase. How well are you removing oxidants, or these reactive oxygen species that UV radiation can lead to the formation of? How well are you able to clear those oxidants, okay? Convert them into hydrogen peroxide, get them out of the mitochondria, out of the cell, get them cleared out. So this is your antioxidation pathway. So SOD2 and GPX, glutathione peroxidase, very important. How well are you doing that? And also looking at your glutathione conjugation pathway. Okay, that's the continued clearance, breakdown clearance of any toxins, of any the refuse of the cells. Say you do have apoptosis, the cell programmed cell death because the DNA damage was too great. Your body has to be able to clear this debris and any toxins that are present in that, cell that just committed cell death. So how well is your body able to do that? So that's an area of your DNA reports that's very important for you to know, and that can help. But, outside of that, melanin production, again, this acts as that photo protection. How well do you do that? So these are areas of your DNA that you can take a look at that can tell you how well you do or do not handle the removal of toxins that can be related to any of the skin cancers that we have talked about.
Yeah, that's very thorough, and there's a lot of information packed into that. And it's interesting because you talk about ROS, reactive oxidation species, right? And so in my polymer background, I understand how that works and how it can be generated. And, I tell people that the sun is the biggest free radical generator on the planet. Of course, it's not on the planet, it's off the planet. But we talk about, free radical generation. And, at least 15, 20 years ago, that was a big deal. We want something that reduces oxidation. So loss of electrons is oxidation. You want reduction. You don't want the cells to oxidize because that really causes aging and potentially other DNA damage that much more about than I do. But for sure, when UV light is involved, there is going to be free radical generation, right? So that's something you want to try to minimize to the best you can. But of course, you need some sunlight so you can generate vitamin D. And we actually make a D3K2 supplement, but that's probably for another broadcast.
Well, okay, so let's talk about products. So here we've gone over, talking about, what is different skin cancers, different aspects of it, how your genes can affect and all of this wonderful information. But let's get to brass tacks here. So how, first of all, can we prevent, either prevent in the first place or prevent for those people who have it or know someone who has it, that so it does not get worse? I mean, it's kind of difficult not to be in the sun, and we know that there are benefits for being in the sun. So what can we do, and what do you have?
Well, of course, the whole products line that we make, which is Third Rock Essentials, Third Rock Sunblock Incorporated is the name of the company. So it's sunscreen. So we make basically a very, very simple version of sunscreen that is very different. What is in it is what's really important. So every other mineral-based sunscreen, which whether it be titanium dioxide or zinc oxide, which is what you ought to be using, mineral-based, because the mineral-based sunscreens do not change in the presence of the sun. At least the active ingredient doesn't. If it's just zinc or just titanium, we only use zinc oxide. But our zinc oxide is not what everybody else uses. We chelate it with L-arginine. So we take the zinc oxide, we chelate it with L-arginine, which is an amino acid. And what happens is we make a very special zinc oxide complex that never can turn into zinc hydroxide. Zinc hydroxide is a salt. And I think we talked about this maybe in the last webinar. The salt is what causes your mineral-based sunscreens to essentially turn into toothpaste over time. They literally salt out. And so what happens, excuse me, what happens is the water, when it mixes with zinc oxide or titanium oxide, turns it into zinc hydroxide. And again, zinc hydroxide is a salt, and it's not as UVA or UVB absorbent as pure zinc oxide, which is a metal oxide. So you literally are changing the chemistry of zinc oxide when you use mineral sunscreens that are 70% by weight water-based. Ours is 70% by glycerin-based. So not only do we not use water to make our product, we use glycerin, vegetable glycerin, which is kosher USP grade vegetable glycerin. USP stands for US pharmaceutical grade glycerin. And all the stuff we use is food grade edible. So in addition to the glycerin, the other ingredients in there include gamma oryzanol, which is a big time antioxidant. We just talked about reactive oxidation species. So gamma oryzanol actually boosts SPF, and we'll talk about SPF, sun protection factor. It also really reduces the amount of reactive oxidation species on the surface of the skin. In addition, we use olive oil, jojoba oil. Jojoba oil is very unique because jojoba plants grow in the desert. And so jojoba oil is one of the few oils that are really, really difficult to get it to go rancid or acidic. Dr. Warburg, people may or may not know of him, discovered in the late 20s, early 30s, that cancer cells cannot grow in an alkaline environment. When we chelate the zinc oxide with L-arginine, the pH goes above 9.5, and at 9.5 to about 11, there is scientific papers that have been published that show that zinc oxide never becomes zinc hydroxide. In other words, zinc hydroxide cannot form in that pH range. It also can't form between a pH of 2 and 3, but that's very acidic, and we didn't want to make an acidic product. We make an alkaline product for a lot of reasons. Um, let's see what else is in there. Basically, beeswax for water resistivity, which is high mountain desert beeswax out of Arizona, of all places, high up in the mountains, where the bees actually have an SPF wax that's higher than most waxes because they're in high altitude. So they're exposed to the sun at a high altitude and get more ozone exposure, which is a big problem still in Australia, although less apparently than it used to be. And then we use a little bit of orange wax, which is a very good emulsifier. We don't use any real emulsifier per se because we don't have to. The glycerin does that for us. We use ceteroglucoside, which is a plant fat, and that together with the waxes is our emulsifier. But ceteroglucoside is a food grade edible substance as well. It's basically, if you've ever boiled vegetables, you'll see little globules come to the surface, and those are ceteroglucoside based fats, if you want to call it that. They're not exactly the fats that you would be eating when you're eating potato chips or French fries, but they have the same basic chemistry back. They more like a phospholipid type thing. And then, that's basically, so 70% glycerin and about 23.5% zinc oxide, and the rest is just the waxes and the oils. And there's not very much of that. Very, very little water. The only water that's in there is what's left over from our chelation with the L-arginine of the zinc. So we say if you wouldn't put it in your mouth, don't put it on your skin. Your skin's your largest organ. And if you wouldn't ingest what you read on the back of the INCI list, they call it an INCI list, International Chemical Index list, which is your ingredient list. If you can't read that and say, oh, I would ingest that, chances are you probably shouldn't be putting it on your skin, because we want to make a non-toxic, non-endocrine disrupting, cytoprotective, immuno-enhancing sunscreen. That was the title of the first patent application. So
Yeah, I mean, this really gets to those people, and there was quite a few of them that were concerned about ingredients in
yes,
blocks,
yes,
that actually I remember us having a conversation before that, there are other sunblocks that claim, oh, this is healthy and it's good. But actually, when tested, specifically one of the places that you said tested it, where it was the Coral Reef Society, that it was
yes,
still causing problems and it was killing the coral reefs. Where when
yes,
they tested yours, not only did it not kill it, but actually it fed them. It
yes,
actually helped the
it
coral.
enhanced it. Yeah, well, coral reefs are microorganisms, right? People may not realize they're living organisms that when the organism itself dies, some of the remaining uh, shell or crustacean or calcium deposit is what makes the reef grow. But the microorganisms have to live. And what happens, of course, with some of the toxic sunscreens, mostly the organic toxic sunscreens that are female mimicking hormones that are killing cells, they also can kill the microorganisms. And so our stuff with the 70% glycerin is actually food for the microorganisms, because glycerin is basically a long chain sugar. You can look at it as really just food. And so, yeah, that is absolutely true. Um,
Also, I wanted to mention, for practical use. And by the way, yes, I showed this while you were talking. Here's one of the sunscreens. And yes,
yes,
I use it and I put it on my granddaughter. And actually, she was just in California and in the sun. And, she's only 16 months old. And it's wonderful for children, non-toxic, food grade. So this is wonderful. But one of the things is when you put it on, and say you're going in the water, talk about some practical things that
sure.
you'll notice.
Yeah, so what'll happen is, because it is zinc oxide. So zinc oxide, it was one of the first nanotechnologies ever produced commercially. And the person who invented that, I know because I do patent work. And so Mark Michnick invented basically nanosizing zinc oxide particles and titanium dioxide particles to make them essentially transparent, because you're competing with these transparent organic sunscreens like avobenzone, oxybenzone, methoxycinnamate, PMMA, which are all organic molecules that in the presence of light split. Well, if you make a nano-sized particle out of zinc or titanium dioxide, it's less whitening. But it's not completely less whitening. And of course, when you add water to them and it becomes a salt, as I just spoke about a couple of minutes ago, it becomes even whiter because it's a salt. It's no longer just a metal oxide. Well, in our case, what happens is we keep it a zinc oxide. We put it in glycerin. You rub it on. It will be white when you first wipe it on. We say just use a little bit because it's glycerin based. It never evaporates. So all the other sunscreens, mineral or otherwise, that are 70% water based, as soon as you put it on your skin, you lose a lot to evaporation, especially in dry climates like where Dr. Lara has been in Arizona and California. Very, humidity's low, and so what'll happen is the glycerin brings water into the skin, and it hydrates the skin a little bit, but it won't evaporate. In fact, the temperature at which glycerin starts to decompose is about 370 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's never going to evaporate. And of course, water will evaporate as soon as it hits your skin. So take a small amount, rub it between your palms, and then start applying it wherever you want to. Wherever your skin is thin is the number one place you want to get it, because where your skin is thin, the UV light is going to do more damage to the thin parts of your skin, your nose, your ears, your shoulders, your neck, wherever your skin is thin, chin, whatever, your face, of course, anywhere in your face. But and especially men who shave their heads, top of your head, very thin skin. So don't mess around with that. And then when you go in the water, what you'll see is you'll see a white sheen when you come out of the water. And that white sheen is really the protective coating that our sunscreen provides. If you come out of the water after 15, 20, or in my case, an hour of being in the water and on the surfboard or whatever it is, and you don't see a white sheen, you should reapply for sure. The number of times you need to reapply really depends on what you're doing, who you are, how much you perspire. We've had some people read the little card that comes in the packet with the product, and some of them don't understand that when we say use a quarter dollop size, that doesn't mean for your whole body. That just means start out with that and spread it wherever you need it. If you're wearing a shirt, or if you're wearing shorts or whatever, or if you're wearing long pants and you're wearing a hat, then there's certain places you just don't need to apply sunscreen. But we recommend putting it everywhere your skin is thin, at least to start out with. And if you're going to be outside doing a marathon, a triathlon, whatever, tennis, whatever, you're going to be outside for more than 20 minutes, start applying it where you need it. And so from a practical standpoint, if you get wet and you don't see the sheen, then you should definitely reapply.
And that's, really good advice, because a lot of people, they don't know that. I mean, they just throw it on once, go to the beach, and like 10 hours later,
Yeah, exactly.
they wonder why they come home with a bad sunburn.
Exactly. Yeah,
So
well, especially deep sea
yeah.
fishing, any time being on the boat where you get the reflection from the water, even if you're skiing and you get the reflection from the snow, you're
Oh,
really getting an
speaking of
intense.
that, yeah, if you're
Yeah,
going skiing, it's like, because there's snow on the ground, uh, don't think you're not going to get a sunburn or a suntan. I mean, reflections off of the sun and off of the water, you can actually get a sunburn inside your nose. That's
absolutely.
so,
Absolutely. Not a
yeah,
pleasant experience. And
no,
of course, we talked about the automobile, right?
right.
If
Yeah.
you're driving, right? It turns out, even if the glass is tinted, it may or may not be filtering out UVA light. It may filter out both UVA and UVB, but probably even if it's just the windshield, your side windows are not going to have the ability to filter out UVA and UVB light. So turns out in your automobile while you're driving during the day in the sunlight, you are getting overexposed and you probably don't even realize it. And it will magnify the intensity of the light, which means you're going to get more UVB if you're, in facing the sun in glass than if you were facing the sun and there was no glass. So just be careful. We have a lot of women that use our sunscreen as a base for their makeup. And the reason for that is a lot of the makeups don't have any sun protection factor at all. The ones that do, unfortunately, they use the cheapest stuff available that's transparent, which is organic sunscreens, which we can put up a slide if you want of what those look like. I think Julius has one, but those organic sunscreens are the ones that are toxic and can cause sometimes more damage than good. And they use them in cosmetics again because they're completely transparent, so you don't see them. With our sunscreen, if you put it on first as a base and then you put the makeup over that, you're going to have full protection. And over time, in a short period of time, our product will seep into the skin, into the pores, and you'll look just as good as you would by using some other, cosmetic.
That's
So anyway,
really good to
that's
know. And,
before.
and knowing that you could still use that as a base and put makeup on and it doesn't look like that. So this is very good.
Yes, yes,
Um,
well, that's good.
um,
Yeah, so
before before
it's
we go
important.
over to the Q&A,
Yes,
with
I know there's a lot of people
my,
waiting to hear from
yes,
us. Yes,
I wanted to bring up something that I had read today serendipitously. I
okay.
saw on LinkedIn, and there was actually a post about this 15-year-old. Time magazine just named him Kid of the Year. His name is uh,
Wow,
Heman Bekele, and he invented a bar of soap that can treat skin cancer. He's only 15, but
incredible.
it went on to talk about that. He was given a chemistry set as a gift when he was 7 years old, and that really triggered his interest in chemistry and in science. And his family emigrated to America, and he noticed that back home in Ethiopia, people would work long hours outdoors under dangerous UV rays and without any kind of protective covering. So that made him really interested and curious about skin cancer. So at age 14, he ended up developing a bar of soap that has nanoparticles containing a drug called imiquimod, which is it's approved to treat some forms of cancer. So
Hmm.
anyway, his soap helps to ensure that the drug stays on the skin at a very molecular level, even when the soap is washed off. And then, and here it goes, this altruistic, brilliant kid, instead of making millions, the soap, it only cost 50 cents. And he's opening a nonprofit to distribute that to communities in need. Um, so here he is in high school, but he does research at Johns Hopkins, Bloomberg School of Public Health in Baltimore. I mean, really amazing. But again, this works at the after the fact, and we really want to work into the prevention. And I will say, I know I saw questions about, oh, what do you think about this particular product or whatever to help with skin cancer? I have
Right,
to say that, first of all, we're not medical doctors. Um,
right,
we are doctors, but we are not your doctor. So we can't give any kind of medical advice, especially when it comes with a current diagnoses, for anything that, works in with treatment plans. What we speak about, the things that we say are for educational purposes only. So if you do have any questions about any of the things we may have mentioned or educated you about, bring it to your doctor, have a discussion, do some research on it, and look at different ways that you can help with treatment if you currently have it or if you have a friend that currently has it. But into prevention, using these products, making sure that you are supporting your detox pathways, really important. Also with the fact of the itch block, how Dr. Gruen was mentioning the workings of that he has found that it even helped to clear and get rid of basal cells, um, for the basal cell carcinoma. So even
yeah,
though
of
FDA not approved, we can't claim
course not.
that, but just know natural products, these are things that you can use. It's not by prescription, and it's again non-toxic, so it's not going to hurt anything. So
Right, and the topicals are very useful. They do work for some people for some cancers, basal cells specifically. But the topicals are, it's very interesting because the dermatologists are not, most of them, not all of them, most of them are really not into applying the topicals. Now, I'm not sure why. I'm sure financially there's a reason, like there is for everything else, right? But it seems like the preferred method of removing basal cells is either direct full removal or Mohs treatment and not using topicals. But you certainly should contact your dermatologist about that and ask them questions about topicals and see if that might apply for what you're for what is causing problems for you if you have been diagnosed with some form of skin cancer. The topicals certainly can work, and certainly I think they're pretty effective. At least my own experience shows that. But we're not giving you medical advice. We want you to talk to your medical doctors.
So let's hop into the question and answers and we'll go through these.
Yes, yes,
All right. So our first question from MS, asking about internal sunscreen, oral supplements for prevention. Uh,
yes, yes.
do you have any information about that?
Well, I have a little bit. There are certain supplements that they claim will make you more resistant to any form of skin cancer. I do know because when I started in on this journey more than, gosh, 15 years ago now, more than that, um, allergic acid is a very, very good way to make your skin protective against skin cancer. And it turns out that allergic acid is in large quantities in something called raspberry seed oil. So believe it or not, when people make raspberry seed jam and raspberry jam rather, and raspberry products, they actually have equipment, and a lot of them are grown and produced in Oregon and California. I found out, and the seeds themselves, when they're pressed, cold pressed normally, make raspberry seed oil, and raspberry seed oil works. It's it supposedly just raspberry seed oil. Rubbing that on your skin will give you a high SPF sun protection factor value for UVB mostly, not UVA, and that's why we use zinc instead of just raspberry seed oil. It also turns out raspberry seed oil is very acidic, but I do know you can take allergic acid in capsule form, and it definitely will help. There's a lot of studies on that. There are other supplements that are out there. I noticed one person had sent in something about coenzymated B3
Mhm.
um, that help prevents basal cell cancer. I don't know that study too well. I'm sure there is a study on B3, and I do take vitamin B supplements regularly. And of course, I use my sunscreen too. But even I'm not even I'm not ironclad against getting skin cancer, as I now have mentioned, on my own shoulder. But the bottom line is, I would say that everybody's DNA is different. Everybody's system is different. So what works for some people may or may not work for you. And you have to be careful when you take those supplements that you don't get adverse reactions that cause, more harm than good. So would I say that there's something out there that's just as good as external sunscreen? I think the answer is it depends on the individual.
Yeah. I mean, there are a couple other things. There's this extract, it's PLE, polypodium leucotomus extract. And really what it is, it's a tropical fern plant. And
Mhm.
the extract is known for its antioxidant, anti-inflammatory properties. So this helps with, an UV radiation damage. It helps protect the skin. You've already mentioned about vitamin B3, niacinamide, astaxanthin. That's a
Astaxanthin,
potent
yes,
antioxidant.
yes, yes,
Beta carotene, which is your vitamin A. Of course, you have to be aware of your genes because your BCMO1 gene, beta carotene monooxygenase, if you do not convert beta carotene to the bioavailable form, which
yes.
is retinol, very well, then you want to make sure that you have the form that you need. There's EGCG it's a green tea extract, things like that. So that really works off of the anti-inflammatory, antioxidant pathways of things that I've talked about
Yeah,
before.
we actually patented when we filed our patents. We actually patented it with using astaxanthin, which is excellent stuff. It's like one of the most potent antioxidants you can find. Green tea extract, another great one. they're very difficult to formulate with what we make, but we could add it. It's just every time we make a change and add something to a formula for our sunscreen, the FDA requires that we do a full panel of testing, which costs $6,000 to $7,000 per test nowadays. And mostly it's SPF. You have to do antibacterial, antimicrobial for shelf life, and you also have to do shelf stability, which we never have a problem with. But anyway, I don't want to get away from answering other questions because we got a lot of them.
Perfect. Okay, so we have another question from MS. And really this person is asking about the theory that melanoma is triggered not only by UV light, but also having fungus in the body. And, asking about that. So here again, yeah, I mean, there are theories, but it really comes back down to the body's ability for immune response. The detoxification pathways, is it being overburdened by any type of, pathogen or fungus that has gotten out of balance? So obviously that really is going to be a major factor when it comes to, chronic inflammation, any infections, of the microbiome, causing any dysbiosis. So that's really where that would lie. And let's see, we've got next question from Leanne. Does melanoma come from only the sun, or what else can contribute to it showing up?
Great question. Great question. Well, the direct answer to that, as far as I know, and Dr. Laura will correct me, or I may be incorrect, but no, melanoma can form not only just from overexposure to the sun. There's other things that cause melanoma in the body.
Yeah. And I mean, again, it really is a matter of factors. There could be genetic components because this comes from the melanocytes, those particular cell types in the skin. Do you have a family predisposition, a familial history of skin cancers or whatever else? There's probably some weaknesses, genetically speaking, and certain toxins, and that's where it happens to propagate. So,
And that's why when those doctors gave those two young guys that I surfed with at age 20 or so, the advice not to surf anymore because they had melanoma and they'd get it again, I was like, are you really sure of that? You really sure of that? It could be something else, right?
There's environmental factors. If someone, let's talk about like x-rays, all right?
Yes.
Or, chemicals like arsenic. Those can
Right.
actually increase your risk, that chemical radiation exposure, and that can again show up as a reaction in the skin. So,
Exactly.
definitely there are
Not to mention the fact that they probably ate at McDonald's every day.
maybe. All right. So another question, Marion. Marion is asking that, or they were told by a dermatologist that you can get basal cell carcinoma without ever going in the sun. Is that true? Okay. Well, actually, we pretty much talked about
Covered that.
as well.
Yes.
So again, I mean, yes, we focused more on the melanocytes. These are the basal cells, but it's the same type of thing. You're still looking in the dermis, epidermis area. It is still the DNA damage that doesn't necessarily have to be with sun. Like what we've already talked about, can be chemical exposures or other types of radiative exposures that you can get it. So yeah, and that's the first form that happens. So, all right. Next question. By the way, if any of you would please like to ask your questions live, raise your hand. We'd love to bring you forward. You can ask it of either myself or Dr. Gary. We love having you, come up and hear your voice and get your questions live.
Yes.
So
Sure.
Margaret is asking, let's see. I find I'm more irritated by mineral sunscreens than the chemical sunscreens, and I wonder if it's the zinc oxide. Are there any safe sunscreens without the zinc oxide? Dr. Gary, you want to grab this?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I would say the direct answer to your question is no. I would say I went on a search for making a non-toxic cytoprotective, meaning you want to keep the cells healthy and free of cancer, immunoenhancing sunscreen, which was, food grade edible as well. And and what I found was in my search, with my scientific expertise and reading the literature, and this goes all the way back 20 years ago now, that it's zinc oxide that has the best absorbance and reflectance capability. So nanoparticles of zinc oxide actually reflect light as well as absorb it. But they actually, your skin is a sponge. So it's going to bring in stuff that's toxic. It's going to get rid of toxins, hopefully. Um, Zinc oxide is the best UVA, UVB absorber and reflector that there is of any of the sunscreens that are allowed. And these are active sunscreens that are allowed by the FDA. So the FDA has a monograph that started in 1978. That's when sunscreen started to be talked about as sunscreen and or sunblock, as opposed to suntan lotion. And titanium dioxide is pretty good. And titanium dioxide is used to make white paint, which is why it's very whitening. So is zinc oxide, but zinc oxide is a little more expensive than titanium dioxide. So, but all of the organic sunscreens were found to be, that are used today, were found to be endocrine disruptors, female making hormones. How were they found? Margaret Schlumpf lathered the back of female rats with the organic sunscreens, the transparent organic sunscreens. It includes methoxycinnamate, avobenzone, oxybenzone, benzophenone, and I have some plots on a graph. I don't know if we have time to bring it up, that show what the UVA and UVB filters are that are used other than zinc and titanium. And honestly, I can't find any of them that I would consider to be quote unquote non-toxic. And I don't think any of them have been found to be anything but endocrine disruptors, female mimicking hormones. So I would say you better stick with zinc oxide. And I don't know, was there another part of that question, Dr. Laura, that I missed?
No, it was just some understanding and then asking if there was any other products,
Okay, cool.
decent products for that. So a next question is from Connie. And Connie's asking, can copper peptides be used to help healing scars from removing skin cancer spots? And actually, I'd like to jump in on this one.
Yeah,
We
please.
did a webinar on peptides. And I love the copper peptides. And yes, absolutely, these can be used to help with healing those scars. Really, okay, so first of all, for the audience out there who's like, what are copper peptides?
Right.
These are small protein fragments that include copper ions, and these are known to play a role in various biological processes related to skin health and repair. So one of the things that they do is they promote collagen production. So
Yeah,
collagen synthesis. Obviously, collagen plays a key role in skin, helps to maintain its structure and its elasticity. So after someone has skin removed from cancer spots, that skin needs to regenerate. Well, collagen, there you go, plays that role
right.
in that process. Another thing is that copper helps with wound healing. What it does is it increases the production of growth factors that aid in tissue repair. So really accelerating that healing process by encouraging the formation of new blood vessels called angiogenesis, that improves that migration of cells to the wound site, really helps with that. It helps improve skin elasticity, firmness. Again, looking at that collagen and the ability of collagen to hold and pull water molecules. That's one of the nice things about it.
Yes.
Got antioxidant properties, a lot of different things. So this helps with, skin barrier function. So absolutely love the peptides, and copper is fantastic.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because it's actually copper oxide, because again, any metal oxide is a very good healing and very antibacterial and antimicrobial, including zinc oxide, copper oxide, silver oxide, which we haven't talked about. We make silver oxide products as well, and they are all very, very healing. substances.
So let's go on to our next question. Anne
Sure.
has a question. If you have sample DNA labs of a sample patient with no name that, oh, it would be great to show about talking about the information that I had given about the vitamin D. Unfortunately, I don't have one available this quick, but definitely, I don't know if you may have already done your DNA test, but you can always go to our site on thednacompany.com. And I believe we have sample reports that you can actually take a look at. And we can also link some information after this webinar is posted. We can see about posting that information so you can take a look and see the different variants that affect vitamin D pathway synthesis, and conversion, transport, and binding. So thank you for bringing that up, and we'll take care of you. All right, next we have Mary asking a question. She says, I heard a guy on Ari Witten's podcast saying the amount of K2 in most formulas, which is in micrograms, is a spit in the wind, quote unquote. And we need grams, not just micrograms or even milligrams. Do you have any opinions on that? Dr.
So
Groom,
this
I'm
is
handing that to you.
this is vitamin K that he's asking about, correct?
Yes, Mary.
He's asking about, sorry. And so I would say the following. The answer to everything, as I tell my students, is it depends. But the reason I say that is because it really does depend. Are you taking a vitamin K supplement by itself? Are you taking it so that you can help with vitamin D bio
Availability.
availability, or bio absorbance? And so the question is a little bit tough to answer. I would say the following: we make a D3K2 supplement, and we chelate the D3 with citric acid so that it becomes bioactive and bioavailable, and that it can really get into the cell, become part of the Krebs cycle, and which helps produce ATP. And Dr. Lar can talk more about that than I can. But what I would say is, if you really, to get good absorption of vitamin D, you really need K. And how much K do you need really depends on, first, two things. I would say at least two things, and then more maybe, is the supplement you're taking, D. What is the dosage of D? Because K is a good carrier for D, but you don't need as much K as you do D to make that happen. And the other thing that matters is your metabolism, and of course the DNA company's ability to analyze what's going on, from a mitochondria standpoint and from at a cellular level. And I think those are all very important aspects. So I'm not sure that milligrams or grams of vitamin K would be recommended, because I think that you probably could OD on vitamin K. I don't know. I haven't looked at the literature to determine what those concentration levels are, but I'm sure I can find some scientific papers that talk about what the recommended dosage of vitamin K should be. And I'm not talking about RDA, recommended daily allowance. I'm talking about, have they, and I'm sure they have done animal studies with K to see, at what level K can actually be damaging to things like your kidneys and maybe other metabolic pathways that Dr. Lara, much more about than I do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when it comes to vitamin K, yes, it is necessary, because when you take a vitamin D supplement, it will liberate calcium from the body, wherever it may be. Well, obviously, we want to have calcium in our food, and there's a whole realm, going through there of the benefits of that. But if it is liberating calcium, where do you have a lot of calcium? Your bones. And we want to make sure that we don't have a lot of, free flowing calcium in the bloodstream, because that can actually cause calcifications, especially in the presence of cholesterol and toxins on the arterial lining. So we want to have that calcium go back into the bones, and K2 helps to do that. And yeah, you don't need very much of that. Honestly, like 200 micrograms in supplemental form is more than enough. And your camera's a little blurry there.
I don't know what happened. I'm going to
So,
stop the video and start it on again and see what happens. If
okay,
that makes it any better.
so we have
There we go.
and just to let you know, I mean, as far as vitamin K toxicity, it's very rare, especially when you're obtaining it through dietary sources. Um, so, you know, I think you'd have to take like really high levels. But honestly, there really isn't any established upper limits for vitamin K due to its low toxicity potential. But you still want to be smart about it, and you want to take the least amount that has efficacy. So,
Yes.
but yeah, I mean, it's not a major issue. So let's go to our last question, Marion again, stating, I'm allergic to zinc oxide in Band-Aids. Would that mean I would be allergic to this product as it's made from zinc oxide?
So she's allergic to zinc oxide and Band-Aids?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's a great question. So first of all, I wondering out loud to her and to your audience if that's really what's going on, because Band-Aids have a lot of, let's just say, first of all, Band-Aids are normally made from plastics. Plastics have a lot of fillers, and the fillers themselves can be toxic. Um, I'm not I'm not aware of a product that uses zinc oxide or solely zinc oxide in a Band-Aid and why they would do that. But if you're getting an allergic reaction to that product, I wouldn't use it. As far as being allergic to zinc oxide per se, I have never heard of anybody having an allergy to the zinc oxide. So I think there's something else going on there besides zinc oxide. I think it's either a plasticizer in the Band-Aid or in the gauze, or something that's combined with the zinc oxide that's causing it to be toxic. For the sunscreen and zinc oxide that we make, what I would tell you is we've never had anybody come back with an allergic reaction to it. We've had some people who have had sunburn or sun sensitivity, but they didn't realize that if they were on an antibiotic, for example, that their skin is way more sensitive to UV light than it would be without it. So I think that's a concern. But the direct answer to your question on that is I think it's not the zinc oxide in the Band-Aid that's causing your rash or your allergic reaction. It's something else. Also, I would say that our zinc oxide is chelated with L-arginine, so it's not the zinc oxide you would find in a Band-Aid or anywhere else because we patented it. We're the only ones who make it that way. And zinc oxide in the presence of water becomes zinc hydroxide, as we mentioned, which is a salt. And I think you might get some irritation from zinc hydroxide that you wouldn't get from using our product. But again,
It's also
there's a lot there.
something that, I would, simply because I like testing things on myself as a scientist. You can order the sunblock from, Dr. Gary's company called Third Rock Essentials, the number 3, and do a little patch test on your skin in a very small area. See how you react. If you're fine, try a larger area. If you do react, give it away to a family member or a friend. It's definitely worth worth it. So, and there's actually a wonderful sale discount that Dr. Gary is offering for our audience. Do you want to just tell us what that is real quick?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Laura. It's 50% off right now. We started the sale today and it goes all the way through Monday of Labor Day. We make both a 3.3 ounce large product and a 1.7 ounce smaller product if you just want to try it out. We make an unscented version because a lot of people just don't want the aromatherapeutic version. The reason the rosemary and the frankincense is in there is because that is a very strong immune enhancing substance. We muscle tested over 200 of my chiropractor kinesiologist patients with it. They all muscle tested positive. We don't have time to go into muscle testing. I can just tell you, we published in the Journal of Toxicology in 2005 our results, including some of the stuff on the muscle testing. And we remember making immuno-enhancing substance. So my goal with the sunscreen was to make it immuno-enhancing, proactive sunscreen, so that you don't get skin damage in the first place, right? Because once you get skin damage, unfortunately, you have to do something about it to repair it. And that's always an arduous process.
Yeah. So I want to say, to everyone out there, first of all, I hope that you have taken away some great pearls of information. If you have learned something new, I don't know if we still have the chat open, but if we do, you know, let us know. Did you learn something? What was your major takeaway from tonight? um we'd love to see that these webinars are making a difference, that you are learning something, that you are getting information to enhance your health. So uh I will say that prevention is key. Take care of yourselves, prevent yourself from getting it in the first place. But even if you have had any type of skin cancers, continue to protect yourself out in the sun and, in general, and in the car, places where you don't normally think, oh, well, I'm not going to the beach. I'm not, out by the pool, so I'm not going to wear it. No, still, anytime that you are being exposed to the sun, it's a good reason to put on some sunscreen. And with that 50% off, stock up. You can always give it away for gifts. Granted, Christmas coming up, you can pop it in a stocking. When people go on vacations during the winter months and they're going to be in the sun, great gift. That's what I did last year. I gave it to like all my family, friends, was passing it out so they can all make use of this wonderful non-toxic product. So I'm loving what I'm seeing in the chat. Yes, that this information has been helpful. There was something about that they don't see the 50% off on the website. So I believe.
Yes. Well, what'll happen is if you go to the website and you order it, you'll see what'll happen is it'll automatically put it in your basket at 50% off. And that the code that we've asked everybody to use is wipeout. So if you need to put the code in there, wipeout, you'll get the 50% off the website. So
Yeah,
and if
Carol
you have
said that she ordered it and it worked. So perfect.
so it worked. Okay, good, good. So wipeout is the password to make sure you get your 50% off. And that is, yes, use the code wipeout. Thank you very much, B. And I've seen a lot of people in the chat ask a lot of different questions. Let's give them our email address to forward, questions to us that we didn't answer. I saw somebody had a question about D3 versus D2. I saw somebody had actually had just got diagnosed and needed some help on healing. We make a Nutrisporin product which will heal your skin. It's silver oxide, not copper peptide, but it's effective, very, very effective. So you'll see that on our website as well. There's a whole host of products that we haven't had a chance to talk about tonight. We make a deodorant spray, not an antiperspirant, wipes out infectious bacteria. Dead bacteria causes odor. We make a chelated zinc oxide product for internal use, which keeps a lot of different things healthy in your body. You don't want to overdose on zinc oxide when you ingest it. We also make a D3K2 product. We make a liver cleanse product. You'll see all these products on our website.
Oh,
and
and I want to mention, sorry for the step
no, that's
there,
good.
but Carol is saying that she owns a swimwear boutique and would love to carry it in her shop,
Right.
asking about, becoming an affiliate. So
Yes.
how would you like anyone who would like to become an affiliate, how can they access and get that information to get that set up?
Yes, great questions. And so the answer to your question is yes, you can be. We do have a wholesale button on our website, but you can also become an affiliate. We have an affiliate program which is very, very simple. It's not an MLM. It's 20% discount and a 20% commission for everybody who uses their code. So you go to Third Rock Star, the number 3RD, Rock, ROCK, Star, STAR. And there you can sign up as an affiliate. I hope it's up and working right now. We've had some problems with it this week.
But you
Uh,
also said that you do wholesale?
yes, we
Oh,
also do wholesale.
okay,
So with
beautiful.
wholesale, yes, absolutely, we do wholesale. And you can contact us directly, or there's a wholesale button that you will show up. The wholesale prices, for everybody's knowledge, is 50% of our retail. So right now, everybody who's using that code for our sunscreen, the wipeout code for our sunscreen, is actually getting it at the wholesale price.
Beautiful.
But of course, that's only going to last until the Monday after Labor Day, so, or the Monday of Labor Day. So the answer is yes, we do wholesale. We also have the affiliate program at thirdrockstar.com for individuals who have clientele, like Dr. Lara, for example, who can use their code, whatever your code is, with a 20% discount for yourself and a 20% commission for yourself. And everybody who uses that code gets a 20% discount on all our products.
So, do you have a YouTube channel?
We do. I think it's called Third Rock Essentials, 3RD Rock Essentials. You can also YouTube me, my name Guerry, first name Gary, last name Grune, and you'll find a lot of YouTube stuff on us. We do have several YouTubes where I've been interviewed by other people about over the last 10 years about our sunscreen. And some of them, one of them in particular was done maybe over 12 years ago by a kinesiologist chiropractor in Buffalo, New York, of all places. So yeah, that's on. I know the DNA company has a very wide, broad audience. So I really appreciate the opportunity to connect with all of you, and of course, Dr. Lara doing all this with us, and her team. It's just been great. There was another comment about citric acid not being good for a person. Well, if you don't get citric acid, your cells will not be able to be part of the Krebs cycle. So yes, you don't want to overdose on anything, but citric acid is vital to every living cell, whether it be a biological cell, human cell, or animal cell. So I don't know who told you that, but you should definitely be careful about people giving you advice unless you study the literature. And of course, we're nerds. Well, at least I am. Dr. Lars.
Oh, I'm definitely a science nerd, but we do want to thank everyone for, being here and for hanging in there, gathering this information so you can take that forward. There will be a replay. It'll be posted on our YouTube channel, the DNA Company, and I'm sure, we'll be able to, cross-pollinate into your YouTube channel as well. So
Yes.
this wraps up our webinar for today. I again want to thank everyone so much for attending. And Dr. Grun, thank you so much for your brilliance, your information, your products. We so appreciate you, here at the DNA Company, and me personally. You're awesome. Keep putting out those awesome products. And we'll keep using them and
Well,
trying
it's a
to make
mutual
them
feeling, as you know, Dr. Lara. So I think hopefully we provided a lot of information. We had over 100 participants at one time during this, and I just hope we provided the information they need to make some wise choices about how to move forward with their health and wellness, especially in the sun. Even though it's almost near the end of the summer, they definitely want to, stay protected. And thank you for everything. You're amazing.
Well, thank you. And I want to thank our crew in the background that makes all of this happen and work. And so have a beautiful day, everyone. Thank you again, and see you at the next webinar. Take care.
Take care, everyone.